Let's take a look at factorising expressions. Um, the expressions that I've got here are two-term expressions, and the reason why they're two-term expressions is you can clearly see there are two terms in each one. So 6x and positive 48, and here in our second one, 6a squared and negative 4a. So these are two-term expressions. We're going to learn how to factorise them. Just to recap, factorising is just taking out the highest common factor in both terms, and then taking that factor out and grouping the two remaining terms together inside of brackets or parentheses. So let's go ahead and do the first one. The highest common factor that you can see in 6x and 48, well, what's the highest number you can see that multiplies to make both 6 and 48? Well, it happens to be 6, right? Because 6 times 1 is 6, and 6 times 8 is 48. So the highest common factor is 6. So the way you write this in factorized form is to write the highest common factor. Well, let's get out of our straight edge. 6. And then you start preparing your brackets. And then you've got to ask yourself this question. So 6 times what is going to make this first term, so 6x. So 6 times what makes 6x? That's just going to be x, right? And you do the same thing with your second term. So 6 times what is going to make positive 48, and that's going to be positive 8. Fairly straightforward, that one. The second example is a little bit more difficult. It's still the same principle, but notice now we have pronumerals or letters. And so when you have letters, you have to assume that those letters will represent the same number. And so, for example, if we just knew that a was equal to, let's say, 10, well then you would know then the highest common factor of 10 and 10 is 10. So whenever you have letters that are the same, the highest common factor of a and a is just a. What makes this a little bit more difficult on top of that is that not only do we have a and an a, but this first a is actually being squared. And so the highest common factor of a squared and a is not a squared, it's just a, okay? So on this term, it's a times a, or a squared, but the only common factor between a squared and a can only be a. So if we go back to writing our highest common factor, we still need to look after the 6 and the 4. The highest common factor would be 2, because 2 times 3 makes 6, and 2 times 2 makes 4. So starting off with your numbers first, you write highest common factor of your numbers, and then you write the highest common factor of your letters or your pronumerals, and that would just be a. And so now you write your bracket. So having a look at your highest common factor, 2a times what makes 6a squared? And so if you're getting a bit lost there, just work with your letters first, with your numbers first, and then deal with your letters. So let's do this. 2 times what makes 6? 2 times 3 makes 6. So you put your 3 there. And now you go, a times what makes a squared? And that's just a. Eventually, after you do enough of these, you'll be able to just do this. 2a times what makes 6a squared? Oh, and that's 3a. You'll be able to do that in your head pretty quickly. Just practice them. All right, so now we got 2a times what makes negative 4a. So again, if you're getting a little bit lost with the letters and the numbers together, just do this. 2 times what makes negative 4? And that's going to be, negative 2. And then a times what makes a? Well, that's just 1. So you don't have to write anything there. And so there we have our factorized versions. So if you want to go ahead and check them, if you want to go and check that these are right, that 2a multiplied by 3a minus 2 in brackets is right, that's the correct factorized form. Well, how could you check? How could you check to make sure that's correct? Well, what you could do is just re-expand these and see if you get the original question. So let's go ahead and expand these now. So the way to expand is by multiplying everything on the outside of the bracket by everything inside the brackets. So the first one would be 2a times 3a, that's 6a squared. And now we have 2a times negative 2, and that's negative 4a. And so we know the second one's right. What about the first one here? Let's have a look at the first one. Let's multiply 6 by x plus 8. So 6 times x is 6x, and 6 times 8, that's positive 48.